Come on by and have a bite at the Crossroad Diner, the place where your spirit goes when it might be time to change direction. We talk to people from all walks of life about when they found their passion, their direction, and how they had the courage to take action. Hey everybody, welcome back. Steve McCurdy here at the Crossroad Diner. We got a great guest today. This guy, I worked with him on my first feature-length motion picture. In fact, I fired me and hired him because I was doing a role because we couldn't find a guy. And then we found Kevin. This is Kevin Dean. Kevin's the artistic producer at A.D.Players in Houston, Texas. Good friend of mine, great actor. Welcome to the Crossroad Diner.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to just, anytime I get to hang out with Steve and chew the fat, I always look forward to that opportunity.
Oh, we're going to chew fat, are we?
Oh, yeah. Okay. We're going to, just like I chew scenery.
Yeah. Well,
anytime I'm on stage, baby.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Kevin, the format here at the diner is the notion of the Crossroad Diner is that place where your spirit goes. Hang on a second. I'm getting a little talk back here on your mic. And
am I too hot? I'm loud.
No, you're good. You're good. The notion here at the Crossroad Diner is the idea that we come to places in our lives where we have questions about where we're coming so far, where we need to go next. And we have to listen to our heart on those things. And sometimes that's difficult. So the Crossroad Diner, in my mind, is this diner at the crossroad of life where it's time maybe to take a change of direction. And maybe it's not. And it's based on a musical I did where the waitresses were Faith, Hope, Grace, and Lucy. And Lucy being
I guess who Lucy was.
Yeah, can you? And they, they kind of, come by and see if you need coffee and whatnot. And, Faith's about now. Hope is about the future. And Grace is about forgiveness for the past. And Lucy's about digging into the ego. And a lot of times you don't know who's waiting on you when you're in that place. You don't know who you're talking to. So let's go back and talk a little bit about when you were in high school or coming up as a kid or college. Did you have a dream? Did you have a thing that you wanted that you were kind of working toward, or were you trying to figure that out?
No, I did. So when I was a child, I lived in a make-believe world.
Not unlike now.
Yeah, not unlike now, right? And I remember, you remember underoos?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I collected underoos. And so I had this red pair of underoos. And as like a 5 or 6-year-old, I would just put those on, and I was Mowgli from the Jungle Book. And I just pretended to be Mowgli. I would run around outside in my underwear. I don't know what the neighbors thought, but I just lived in that world and sort of grew up that way. Just anytime I would play make-believe, I had to have the costume. I remember I had an old fedora, so I could be Indiana Jones and anything. It start Luke Skywalker, whatever. I had to have the costume, and I just lived in this make-believe world. And I always wanted to be an actor. And then I got to probably 6th grade, 7th grade, junior high, started to play sports, and then fell in love with sports. And that became my focus. And so
now, what was the sport? Basketball? Okay.
Basketball and baseball were my two favorite. I tried football, but I wasn't. You kind of have to have a collision mindset to play football, and I don't particularly like to get hit or tackled. So
can't blame you there.
Yeah,
right
so
there
I
with
gravitated to the more sports where contact was at least a foul. And so it turns out I was better at basketball, and then did that. And my plan when I got to high school, I wanted to play college basketball and then professional basketball. Problem was I stopped growing at 5'11".
Oh.
And didn't get any bigger, didn't get any taller. I was really fast. I was always fast for my age, but basketball, you have to be quick. And I was always faster than I was quick. And then by the time I got to my junior year, I took a theater class by accident. That's a funny story. So at the end of your sophomore year, you have to fill out what electives we wanted to take, right? And I think we got 2 or 3 electives. I can't remember. Well, I put basketball as one of my electives, and I didn't fill out the rest because I didn't care. And, well, what they did was they took that and they just assigned me a class. So they assigned me the yearbook class and the photography class. So I had basketball, yearbook, and photography. Those were my electives. Well, evidently, you had to like write an essay and get accepted into the yearbook program. And so all these girls in this year that were on the yearbook committee got really angry because I just showed up and I didn't fill anything out. I just got assigned the class because there was a slot available. So I had to go back down to the counselor's office on the first day of school and be like, look, man, I can't be in that class. And they're all right. Well, the only other elective that was available at that time was a theater class. And so the fall of my junior year, we did Harvey by Mary Chase. And man, I just fell in love.
Did you do Elwood?
I was Elwood. And it was just an amazing experience. But at the time, I still had these delusions that I wanted.
Hang on.
Okay.
Hang on. Just for all those folks that have been, killing themselves to be in theater, you got accidentally assigned to the class, then you got cast, and you got cast in the lead.
Yeah.
So there were more people that were pissed off at you than just the girls.
No, I mean, at the time, I think if I think back at that class, there were a lot of people were just in that for the fine arts credit.
Okay.
Like we didn't have like if you were serious about theater, there was like a theater 2 class. This was like the intro to theater. And
but
so
still, they were doing a show. They were casting the show, and all those theater 2 guys were auditioning for this. And here comes this theater 1 guy who didn't even know he wanted to be there, gets cast in the lead. Now that there was no friction on that?
No, there wasn't any friction. I think because I fit the physical bill of what they were looking for at the time. I wasn't tall, but relative to the other kids in the theater class, I was tall, and I was real skinny, and I had the fedora, like I mentioned earlier. So I had the costume.
Oh yeah, he had the costume.
Yeah. So they're like, yeah, you're Elwood. And that was just an incredible experience. I enjoyed it so much that following summer, I auditioned for the musical Babes in Arms at what is now Henderson County Performing Arts Center. Back then, it was Athens Little Theater. And I got cast in that. I was the villain, Lee Calhoun. And then we got word that the fall musical for my senior year was going to be Man of La Mancha. And I had seen that movie with Peter O'Toole. And I can't remember how I saw that movie, but I had seen that movie with Peter O'Toole and was just in love with it. So, I started taking voice lessons with the choir teacher at our high school that summer so I could try to prepare for this role. Because I can hold a note, but I'm not what you would consider a singer, a soloist. And so I auditioned for that, and I got cast as the lead, as Don Quixote in Man of La Mancha. And at the time, still, I was still the captain of the basketball team. And let's see, we started rehearsals in September, October-ish in the fall, but we didn't have performances until December. That's how you did things back then. I mean, you rehearsed all semester. And I knew that we had a tournament during one of the show nights. But it would depend on whether or not we won or lost that particular game to see whether or not it would conflict. So I had to go tell my coach that. He didn't sit well with him, but he decided to take a wait and see approach. Well, the worst case scenario happened, and I ended up having to miss a game. Like I had to make a choice my senior year. Do I quit this play, like after we've opened, to go play this game, or do I miss this game to go be in this play? And man, that was at the time, that was the hardest decision that I'd had to make. And I decided to do the show because I'd committed to that. And
well, you were in the Crossroads Diner right then.
And so I did, and that just caused a whole lot of trouble between myself and the coach. And the long story short, by the end of, so let me go back. Let me back up just a little bit.
Okay.
So after opening night, and this made the decision. I mean, it wasn't an easy decision, but this is just what I couldn't escape. After opening night of Man of La Mancha, I sat in our cafeteria, which is, we didn't have a theater or an auditorium. We had a cafeteria / auditorium. And I was sitting in there with our theater.
It's an
teacher.
I think it's an East Texas tradition.
Yeah, it is.
I think
it's a tradition.
It's a requirement.
You know, it's like the dinner theater for high schools. And I just was sitting in the cafetorium with my theater teachers, and I didn't want to leave because that was just the most magical feeling that I'd had, was to do that play, to sing that song, The Impossible Dream. You know, the curtain call it was all unlike anything I'd ever experienced, and I didn't want to let it go.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of when I figured out this is what I should be doing. And then I had all this conflict with the basketball coach, and it just became clear that, you know, I'm not getting any taller. You know, I'm not getting any quicker. I can't jump any higher. So my ceiling for basketball was very low. And plus that senior year had sort of robbed the joy of basketball from me. And it was replaced with this new love of theater. But, you know, it's interesting, like, I had identified as an athlete for so long, it still took me a while before I could start to see myself as an artist, as an actor. And it's interesting, those roller coasters you go on, because I knew that I loved this, but it was really hard for me to not see myself as an athlete, not identify that way. But once I got into college and I took a theater scholarship to the community college in Athens, and it just felt, you know, like home. And so then that's when I decided, you know, this is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. I want to be an actor. I want to tell stories.
Right. And I want to pick up from there, but I want to back up a little bit. You were at the Crossroads Diner. I mean, you had to make a choice, go to this game, go be on stage. How late in the game did you make that decision, and how did you make that decision?
It was hard because I knew we had, so we performed, I want to say, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So we had a game at this tournament in this other city on Thursday. And I can't remember if we won or lost the game. But as a result of that game, we had to play the next night rather than Friday morning. So we had to play Friday evening. And so when we found out our schedule, we're going to have to play Friday night, it was within hours. Like the next day, like I went home and my coach was expecting me to quit the play, and I had to make a choice. And my theater directors, they expected me to do the play because they didn't have a backup. And their logic was, you've got other people on the team. We got nobody. Right. And, you know, my parents were, we talked about support earlier. My parents were always very supportive of this, me being an actor, and they were very helpful in making this decision. And they told me, I mean, this is your decision to make. You know, you're 17, you're about to be 18. I was 18 at the time. Like, you're going to have to start making these decisions, and we're going to support you. And so I made that decision to do the show, and gosh, you know, I think now, like, I'd never really considered until now, what if I'd made the other choice? Like, I have no idea what would have happened, like, in terms of what would that have been like, you know?
Right.
Because my teammates understood, and there was never any friction with the team.
Right.
The friction was always with the coach. But I mean, I would be letting this entire other cast of characters down who put their blood and sweat and tears into this production since the fall.
Right.
And, yeah, it just felt like the right decision.
Well, and you had too. I mean, you were going to get minutes in the game. There's no question about that, but you had the whole show.
Yeah.
And there's a school reputation issue riding there as well. But so those were the criteria, but how did you make that decision? What was the thing that made you go, no, I want to do this? Was it the one that you would enjoy the most, the one that you were fulfilling the most responsibility and service to others? What tipped it?
For me, it felt like this game is going to happen, whether I'm in it or not.
Right.
This show can only happen if I'm in it.
There you go.
And
you're going to catch crap no matter what you do.
It's a lose-lose.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's going to be a difficult, so no doubt about it.
So for me, it was
decision, Kevin, that decision put you in the chair you're in.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. It's really fascinating how it's interesting as artist, as an actor. At first, I identified as an actor, and I was an actor for years. I didn't want to do anything but act. And as you get older and as your priorities change, you start to broaden that. Okay, I'm an actor and I'm a director. I'm an artist now. It becomes a little broader. And you get older and your priorities change and then it becomes, well, I'm an actor, I'm a director, I'm a writer. And then you sort of get into, when I got to the A.D.Players, you get into, I fell in love with sort of the other side of the table, the management side, the putting together of the puzzle. And so then, well, I'm a theater maker now. But each one of those is a shift in identity and how you sort of see the world around you and how you prioritize things. Once upon a time, I wouldn't have done anything to be on stage. I didn't care if I was second guard from the left.
I know that feeling.
Now I'm like, I've got a 5-year-old and, she starts soccer practice next week and she started kindergarten yesterday. And so I want to be a part of her life and her growing up, because my dad was always there. He was at every basketball game, every soccer game, every sporting event I was ever in. And he was at every play that I'd ever been in. So I always knew, and sometimes it's interesting. Like I think back when we played basketball, I grew up in East Texas. And so we would go all over East Texas and play. And sometimes my dad was the only one in the bleachers for our team, on the visiting side. It was like full on this side and then my dad over on the other side. And, so I want to be that type of father that's always there and supportive and that she knows she can count on. So, when you're in a rehearsal, if you're in a play, that it's an 8-week, sometimes 9-week commitment. If you direct a play, it's less. It's 3 to 4 week commitment. So I'm a little more selective about where my time goes and when, so that I can be there for her at this point in time. Because now, not only am I a theater maker and actor and all that stuff, I'm a dad, and I'm a husband. So
one of the things, and I don't want my bias to color this too much, but I struggle with a lot of those same kind of things. In fact, my deal, I remember Jeanette saying at one point in time, we're talking about Jeanette Cliff George, who was the founder of the A.D.Players, that she created her theater company so she'd get cast in something, and that if you've got that thing where you want to be on stage, you do things necessary to do that. But I think you do discover, and certainly that was true for her, that you're what you are as a storyteller. And this is just one of the many ways that you kind of go about it. And, but as a director, you get to influence that story widely, even as a producer. As an actor, you make your own choices and it influences other choices. But as a producer or a director, you actually get to say, what is this story about? I mean, I know it's on the page, but what is our version of this going to be about?
Right.
And how can we serve all the people that are on stage and backstage and around, and the history of the theater? Tell us a little bit for the folks who are not familiar with A.D.Players and its incredible growth this last half decade. Give us a summary of what the company is, how long you've been with it, that sort of thing.
So the company was founded in 1967 by Jeanette Cliff George, who at the time was a resident company member at the Alley Theater under the artistic direction of Nina Vance. I mention that because that's important, because Nina Vance is one of someone that's widely considered one of the matriarchs of the modern regional theater, right? It's Nina Vance, Zelda Chandler, and Margot Jones. Now, Margot Jones and Margot Jones and Nina Vance were both from Texas. Margot Jones had her theater in Dallas and Alley Theaters in Houston. But Jeanette worked with all three of those ladies. She worked consistently with Nina, but she did shows up at Arena Stage with Zelda. She did shows in Dallas with Margot. And I think she was very influenced by these three very driven entrepreneurial women who really sort of created the regional theater. And I think she wanted that, she being a Christian, and then being involved in secular theater, there weren't a lot of stories that, I guess, were about her faith or told the type of stories that she wanted to tell. And so she started the A.D.Players so that she could tell those stories. And she started writing a lot of the plays. So when we first started out, we were the after dinner players. And that's what the AD stands for. And so the conceit was, we will perform for you after dinner. So we'll show up at your library or your house or your church. You feed us, and then we will perform. And so that's what it was. It was sort of the beginnings of the living room theater. Yeah. And then it started to grow. But for the first decade or so, it was primarily a touring company. And then in 1975, she went off to star in The Hiding Place as Corrie ten Boom. Went overseas to shoot that. Came back. The film was released and was a big success. And that sort of turned her into a bit of a celebrity, certainly in the Christian circles. Yeah. So she began traveling around, speaking at churches, women's events, universities, Bible colleges, and anywhere she would go speak, she would take the touring unit. So they would go and perform as well. And so the A.D.Players started to gain a bit of a reputation as a national touring company. And that went on till, I can't remember the exact date, sometime in the 80s. They purchased the property over on West Alabama, which used to be a church, and then they converted that into the theater. And then that was the space they were in the 80s, 90s until I got there. I got there in 1999. So I started in September of 99. And I remember the first play I saw there was The Importance of Being Earnest. And Jeanette was Lady Bracknell. It was just absolutely incredible. I was like, this is where I want to be. And so I started as an intern there. And then, we had a main stage season where we did 5 shows a year. We had a children's theater season. I think we did 4 or 5 children's shows a year. We had a national touring company that's toured, up and down the United States at churches and universities and stuff. And so that's what I did for many years.
23 years. I mean,
yeah. Eventually I took over the children's theater and started running that. And programming that for Jeanette. And then, as she started to get older and we started to decide, if we're going to build this theater, we need to get on the ball so that Jeanette can see it. Right. I came on board, I think, as her associate artistic director to take some of that responsibility off her plate, as all this was happening. And, became full-time artistic director 2018, I think.
Yeah.
And so, it's quite a journey.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
I want people to get a picture of what AD is, and because now you got a fabulous facility right in the heart of the Galleria.
That property on West Alabama, that was a theater that had about a 220 seat capacity. When we moved into this theater at the George on Westheimer in the Galleria, it's 440 seats. You could probably get about 450 in here, but we doubled in seating capacity. Our stage footprint more than doubled. I mean, we have 75-foot fly loft. I think it's 40 by 40 from the plaster line to the back, and then we also have about a 10-foot extension that we can put in. So the footprint of the stage is much grander. And that was sort of a big learning curve, was producing on this size capacity to this size capacity overnight.
Well, and one of the big questions that the theater community in Houston had is they're doubling in size. The expectations are, how are they going to expand this greatly in a competitive environment? Because there's good theater all over Houston.
Yeah.
Places, people can spend money on a theater ticket and they expect great things. And what happened was so remarkable that you're also critically one of the highest rated theaters in the region, let alone Houston. You guys are just doing spectacular work. But what this show is about that decision-making process. You have so many people walk through that door who could be making a lot more money, a lot easier somewhere else. And they are committed to the kind of things that you've just been talking about: storytelling, good storytelling, life difference making. And what are you seeing as there probably isn't one thing, but when you see folks that are making those kinds of decisions, how are they choosing this art path with maybe less reward and harder to get over maybe an easier path?
Well, that's interesting. The regional theater is sort of in a bit of a, I don't know, exodus right now. You see a lot of people that, now that we've come out of COVID, have just been burnt out. And so what it's caused us in the theater business to sort of reevaluate is what is really important. Is the art important? Yes. Are the artists important? Yes. And I think, not that anybody intentionally takes advantage of artists, but because there's always people that the show must go on.
Yeah.
And that mentality, I think, is a bit outdated. And I think that's what we've learned is, maybe the show shouldn't go on. Maybe we do need to reevaluate how we're allocating hours. How long is our work day? I mean, I think that's what working from home has opened up. Some people, I am not one of these people, but my wife is. Some people are more productive at home and can get more done in a shorter period of time.
Right.
So reevaluating things like that. So how much value is there in providing people an opportunity to work from home where they can be more productive than they would be in the office, because they're not spending 30 minutes or an hour and a half on the road each day, depending on where they live. They can work from home. Some other people aren't like that. I'm not one of them. I'm more productive when I'm in the office. If I have to take a shower and get out of my pajamas, or I'm just not going to get anything done. But the flip side to that is there is a component of our staff that has to work on site. Like you can't build a set from home. You can't build costumes from home. You have to be here where there's material and all that stuff. And so, we've looked at ways, well, some people can, and they're getting that benefit. How can we benefit and reward the people that don't have that option? Because now gas is a lot more expensive, right? Than even it was during COVID. So, are we able to cover, a tank of gas a week for people that have to come in? 2 tanks of gas, whatever that happens to be. Those are things we're looking at now, because we want to take care of the people that make the art possible, and have that be as an important part of the conversation is how good is the art that we're producing. Because there's a high burnout rate in theater.
That's true.
And it's because it's really, really easy to take advantage of people, because most of the people that get into this business, I don't want to say are perfectionists or workaholics, but they're not lazy. Most people, they want to work hard. And we happen to have a very versatile staff where I've got a lot of people that can do a lot of things. And so because people are really capable, it's really easy to overload their plate, because they're good at so many things. So, we went through some time this last year sort of reevaluating, all right, what's the staff look like? Do we need to create some positions? What do we need to do to alleviate some of the pressure that's on some of our core staff? And so that they can be more productive and at least have some mental health, because that's something else that's really important, I think.
Sure.
I mean, I know coming out of COVID for me was, I went through a period of time where, and I think a lot of theater makers did, where we're like, why do I even want to do this? Why do I do this? Because we weren't able to produce what we were meant to produce for about a year and a half,
Right.
And for me, I remember I was the first season I programmed as artistic director was 2019-2020. Well, that's the season that got canceled 3 shows in. And no, I programmed that the year before. So the first one I programmed would have been the 2020-2021 season, which got completely scrapped. And there was so much of, that was my first season. There was so much of myself and my heart and my imagination and the teams that were created and the casts and the creative teams and the directors. It was just all very personal to me. So just to have to cut that was difficult. And I know I'm not the only. Rob Melrose was like that at the Alley. That was his first season as artistic director. And that's a hard thing. You don't think about it, and I didn't think about it till about 6 or 8 months in. And my wife was like, I think you're depressed. I went through like a grieving period for that because of how much time we put into curating that season. And then not only to have to cancel it, but then, I had all these great artists that we were going to showcase that year. So a lot of that got tabled, and that was difficult. And then we had to produce a season that wasn't theater, like virtual theater. There's a difference between theater's live on stage, and it's about the energy that's in the room. And I mean, you've made movies. When you make a movie, it's what's in the lens. That's what's important. It's meant to be experienced that way. And those two mediums, it's difficult for them to coexist. Even when you watch a really slick filmed version of a play, it's still different.
Yeah, I've never seen it done really, really, really well, except for maybe Nicholas Nickleby, but they had the cameras on stage almost like a character. It wasn't proscenium. It was more like a movie.
Yeah.
But yes, they're completely different art forms. The acting techniques are quite different. Yeah. Well, I hate this, but we're up against the out time here.
Okay.
But I would love a couple of thoughts from you about the confidence or not, or how to look into yourself at these decision points and trust or not the pulls that you have. It sounds to me like your gut is particularly on the basketball decision. You had a lot of there were good arguments on both sides. And that quite often is the case. You went with your responsibility to the most people. The theater people couldn't do it without you. The basketball people could sub somebody in, maybe not as great and marvelous as you, but they had somebody play the position. Nobody knew those lines or those songs except you. But when you decided to go to college, when you decided to go to turn your career, that was about you.
Mm-hmm.
So, what can you share with us about that decision process?
I'll tell you, there's two things I think that are important. And now I'm thinking back on the decision to make the shift from being an athlete to being an actor and deciding to do that as a career path. It comes down to two things for me. And I think the first one is wise counsel. You need people in your life that can be honest with you and that can help you process, because it's very easy to get lost in the weeds when you're trying to make a big decision, because you start to see things through either rose-colored glasses or, you can't see the forest for the trees. And I can remember having a couple of conversations with people in my life, my dad, my best friend's father at the time. I remember having a conversation in his kitchen after he had seen Man of La Mancha, and he was just telling me how I could make a career out of this. He's like, you should go to college. And at the time he was trying to get me to go to Baylor, which I almost did. So you need people in your life that can be honest with you about your strengths and your weaknesses, and be honest with you about what the circumstances are, so that they can help you process Am I really seeing what I think I'm seeing? Am I really feeling
Right.
what I think I'm feeling? And how can I separate the truth from what I'm feeling? Because your feelings can be misleading.
So get help with a reality check is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Yeah. And have somebody be able to sort of, help you and listen and bounce an idea off of, and then trust what they say. The second thing is your gut. I think, what's your gut tell you? And sometimes that can be confusing because your feelings can get in the way. I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, but your feelings, sometimes your perception is your reality, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's actually real. It just means,
That's right.
I think it's this way. It feels this way. It must be this way. And that's not always the case. So, when you're at a moment where you have to make a difficult decision, it's always great to have, somebody that you can process that decision with. So it's good to have mentors in your life, I know when I've thought about, my dad has always been that to me, my father-in-law, my pastor. They've always been people. And then I have a couple of colleagues in the industry that I can reach out to and be like, hey, man, let me bounce this idea off of you.
Right.
And sometimes they have experience in that area. And it might not be apples to apples experience, but oftentimes, if you surround yourself with other leaders, they've had to make difficult decisions and are able to offer you some advice, at least.
Right. So, really good counsel, and I really appreciate you distilling that for us. This episode is probably going to drop sometime in late September, early October. What will be happening then if people are in Houston, want to see some theater at the A.D.Players? What's going on at that point in time?
We'll be producing a world premiere called Miss Maud. It's directed by Sheldon Epps. He was the former artistic director at Pasadena Playhouse, which is a premier regional theater. Right. He was the interim artistic director at Tuts for a bit before Dan Cactus got out there. He's directed, my goodness, he's directed tons of television. He's directed episodes of Frasier. I want to say Friends, Cheer. You think of a hit TV show, chances are he's directed it. He's also directed for Broadway on London's West End. Very accomplished director. He's coming in to direct this, and the hope is that then after it has its world premiere here, it will transfer to Broadway in the spring. So we're producing what we call an enhanced production. So, we cast everyone but the two leads from Houston. The two leads are Broadway actors who are coming in. And the idea is to, have its first run here and then transfer to Broadway in the spring. Most shows that go to Broadway have a
regional
an out of town tryout, so to speak.
Right.
So
right.
That's the ambition for this production.
Well, Kevin Dean, artistic producer for A.D.Players, thank you for joining us in the Crossroad Diner.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Join us in the Crossroad Diner every Monday and Thursday. And this Thursday, we welcome PhD candidate Samantha Sandy as we walk through her hours in the Crossroad Diner that brought her to the University of Dublin, far from her Houston home and Texas roots. Hey, subscribe if you will, and we'll see you real soon.